Now you may be thinking, what the heck are you talking about? It's often referred to situations where, again, you can't solve the problem because the solution is within the problem itself, and it's just like this circular loop. So, this is a great noun to describe this type of situation. And again, it's just like a standalone statement. When you are tough, they resent you, and when you are cool, they walk all over you. Catch 22. There's no unspoken thing. Well, it's a catch 22 because if you said it, then it would be spoken. Part of their parole is that they're required to have a job. It's a catch-22 because not that many people are that excited to hire a felon. We don't really use this noun with any adjectives. It's just really that standalone statement, and you would describe something and say it's a catch-22. Next is epitome. This noun has 4 syllables, and the stress is on that second syllable. Epi to me. This is a word that, when you see it, many times people may mispronounce it because the third syllable has that schwa, and the last syllable is that long E. Epi to me. What it means is a person or thing that is typical of a class or group as a whole, something that possesses to the highest degree what this whole group is all about. Therefore, we say that something is the epitome of something else. Kind of giving an example, saying that this thing best represents this whole group. It's the epitome of something bookish. English is the epitome of English teaching excellence, and if you agree with that statement, then go ahead and hit that like button down below. It's kind of like a quid pro quo. I teach you new nouns, you hit that like button. It's a fair exchange. Another great noun is dichotomy. This word has 4 syllables, and the stress is on the second syllable. Daicho to my. That third syllable has that schwa sound, dicho to my. What it means is the division or contrast between two things that are represented as being opposed or entirely different. So let me give you a couple of examples of a dichotomy. You could have science and religion, 2 things that you can compare, and they're kind of opposed to each other in some ways. Also, city life and country life, completely different, but we can still compare them. When using this noun, you say the 2 things that you're comparing. For example, the dichotomy of good and evil, or the dichotomy of jock and artist. Often we use it with the preposition between. You talk about the dichotomy between 2 things. For example, we could say, we're studying the dichotomy between economic development and environmental protection. The next noun is myriad. This word has 3 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable, myriad. A myriad is a very great or indefinitely great number of things. Often, it can be used as a synonym for various. You talk about a myriad of something. There's a lot of variety, a great number of these things. For example, there is a myriad of trees in the forest. The next noun is credence. This word has 2 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable. Credence. What it means is the belief as to the truth of something. It's showing that the belief is true. For example, I never gave these stories much credence. In contrast, he's a criminal and a terrorist. People aren't going to give him credence. And though we give them no credence at all. You often find this noun with the verb give. Something gives belief credence. It makes it seem a little more true. For example, the email they discovered gave credence to his unethical behavior. Next is malaise. This word has 2 syllables, and the stress is on the second syllable, ma-lize. This is not a great noun. The reason I say this is because its meaning is a vague feeling of physical discomfort or uneasiness as an early sign of an illness. So, if somebody is just starting to feel ill, then it's very possible that they might experience malaise. For example, I experienced bad headaches and malaise before deciding to go to the doctor. The next noun is sycophant. This word has 3 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable, sycophant. The spelling may throw people off from the pronunciation, but that as is just pronounced sick. The meaning of a sycophant is a person who tries to gain attention by flattering wealthy or influential people. This is not a good noun. You don't want somebody to call you a sycophant because it basically means you're sucking up to somebody else for no real reason. It's pathetic. For example, some sycophants in the media refuse to acknowledge the political corruption. Another great noun, which is one of my favorites, is dilettante. This word has 3 syllables, and there's kind of like a stress on the first and last syllable, dilettante. The reason I say it's one of my favorites is because I guess I could be considered a dilettante. Many of us can be considered dilettantes because its meaning is a person who cultivates an interest in something without really learning in-depth information. I think this just happens with people all the time. We become interested in a topic and we learn a little bit about it so that we can converse with our friends and have discussions, but we have difficulty really debating this topic with facts and information because we just don't know enough. For example, they will remain dilettantes in war and tourists in Vietnam. What's your point? Your knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep. Do you know what that makes you? A dilettante. But if somebody calls you a dilettante, then it's probably not in a good sense because they're probably referring to you saying, well, you're a person who thinks you know a lot, but you really don't. For example, she thinks she knows a lot about health and nutrition, but she's really a dilettante. The next noun is zenith. It has 2 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable, zenith. When talking about the zenith, you're talking about the top, the peak, the highest point or state of something or someone's condition. So if you are at the top, the highest point, then you are at the zenith. It basically implies that you're not going to go any higher, so it's like saying you've reached the top, you're not going to go any higher, and things are just going to start going downhill from here. For example, his athletic career has reached its zenith. So I hope some of these nouns were new for you, and now that you've learned them, you can go out and practice using them so that you can improve your overall English fluency. Today I have a vocabulary lesson for you, and these words are all adverbs. They are advanced adverbs, and every single one of them ends in lie. These are great adverbs to know because they're really going to help you accurately express your thoughts, opinions, and ideas. Throughout the lesson, I'm going to do a few things for you. I am going to show you the adverb. I will then tell you the correct pronunciation. I'll give you the meaning. And then I will also give you some example sentences so that you can see how the adverb is used in context. That is really useful because it's just going to reinforce the meaning. So let's begin. The first adverb is annually. This word has 4 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable, A-N-N-U-A-L-L-Y. The second syllable is like you're just saying that letter U, and the third syllable has that schwa sound, N-Nu-Al-Li. This adverb means that something is occurring once a year. Something happens once every year. It happens annually. For example, the U.S. Marshal Service annually flies 155,000 prisoners around the country, and evidence suggests it sheds its skin and annually extends annually to 12 million a year. It's also quite commonly used with numbers. For example, when you're talking about banking and maybe you earn interest on the money that's in the bank, you will earn interest annually. We could also use it and say, everyone should file their taxes annually. The next word is reluctantly. This word has 4 syllables, and the stress is on the second syllable, reluctantly. The third syllable also has that schwa sound, reluctantly. What it means is just unwillingness to do something, that you are not inclined to do this thing. For example, I am asking for your help, but he reluctantly gives his loser son just grief and a place to live. And each year we have to pay our taxes annually, but I think most of us reluctantly file our taxes. It's not something we want to do, but we have to do it, and many of us do it reluctantly. For example, the employees reluctantly came into work over the weekend. Then we have unabashedly. This adverb has 5 syllables, and the stress is on the third syllable, unabashedly. That second syllable has that schwa sound, unabashedly. What it means is that you are not apologetic, you are not embarrassed. You are very certain about your position. You do something unabashedly, or maybe you say something unabashedly. For example, she unabashedly told her boss that she wanted a raise. Then we have an adverb that I like to use, and that is vaguely. It has 3 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable, vaguely. Vaguely means that something is not clearly expressed or something is not clearly stated. For example, this smell is vaguely poisonous, and you are exposing me to information and ideas that seem vaguely familiar. If I were to reach our rendezvous on Titan with the time stone still attached to your vaguely irritating person, Kramer, remember that whole deal with you selling Peter and your stories for his book, and then he gave them back to you vaguely. We often use it with the word remember. For example, I vaguely remember, or I vaguely remembered the example. I vaguely remember you telling me to pick this up at the grocery store. The next adverb is one of my favorites, fervently. It has 3 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable. Fervently. What it means is that you are showing great enthusiasm, great intensity to do something. For example, right now, I'm fervently trying to explain the meaning of these new adverbs, and they fervently worked around the clock in order to finish the project on time. Next, we have diligently. This adverb has 4 syllables, and the stress is on the first syllable, dili gently. It means that you are working very hard to accomplish something. You are very focused on the task at hand. Often it's used with the verb work. For example, we have been working diligently on this problem, and the person shares your concerns and is working diligently to find a solution. Senator Gates had a series of mini-strokes a few months ago, but we are working diligently to get him through his final term. I'm sure all of you are working diligently to build your vocabulary and learn new words, which is why you're here. The police diligently collected evidence in order to find the criminal. Then we have another great adverb, which is vicariously. This adverb has 5 syllables, and the stress is on that second syllable, vicariously. The third syllable, it's like that letter I, just has that E sound, and the fourth syllable has the schwa sound, vicariously. What this adverb means is imagining a situation through the eyes of another person. Okay, and it's often heard over and over again in the same way you live vicariously through another person. So if somebody else has this exciting life going on and you're trying to imagine it, you might tell them, "Wow, I am going to live vicariously through you. Yes, I live vicariously through you." Remember, oh, I'm going vicariously through you. Guys, can I marry a man? Uh-huh. I need to live vicariously through you. Just give up details. No, wow. I'm just going to live vicariously through you because you're doing all these cool and amazing things, and you're going to tell me about it, and I will imagine it. She lived vicariously through her children. The next adverb is hastily. This word has 3 syllables, and the stress is on that first syllable. Hastily. What it means is just excessive speed, that you are doing something quickly, rapidly, and with great urgency. Because you're working so fast, you're not going to be able to put the same amount of care into it that you normally would, which means that you might be more likely to make mistakes if you are working hastily. Yesterday's hastily passed, untested pandering laws. Perhaps I spoke hastily. Oh, the last-minute gift hastily bought on the way to the party. Often, I think of a situation where you're running out of time, and that's a problem, so you have to work hastily in order to get it done. They hastily completed the final report in order to meet the deadline. Then we have another great adverb, utterly. This word has 3 syllables, and the stress is on that first syllable, utterly. It means completely, totally, absolutely. Those are all synonyms for utterly. He was brilliant. Utterly, utterly brilliant. She's insane. Utterly mad. Completely and utterly alone. I prefer to use utterly because I think it adds a nice little emphasis to the verb or the adjective that you're describing. For example, his outfit is utterly ridiculous. Next is intently. This adverb has 3 syllables, and the stress is on that second syllable, intently. So this word means that you're just giving all of your attention to something, that you are sharply focused on this thing. I'm sure he's pressing his ear up against it and listening intently. Why is he watching us so intently? You are intently listening to someone. Maybe you are intently watching something. Are you guys intently watching this video? I hope so. I hope you listen intently to our lessons. So, we work diligently to come up and create new English lessons for you guys each week, and I completely and utterly hope that you find them useful and that they're easy to follow. So, if they are, if you were listening intently to this lesson, let me know in the comments. Tell me and just write, "I intently listened to this lesson." That way I know that you were focused, you paid attention, and you understood all of these adverbs. Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button. Actually, you can fervently hit that like button. Do it with some energy, some enthusiasm. I want to teach you 15 irregular verbs that I think will help you improve your overall English fluency. Now, these irregular verbs in particular are not as common as verbs like go or have, but they are very useful, especially in specific situations, which is why they are a bit more advanced. So I'm going to give you the verb in 3 different forms: the present, the past, and the past participle. I will also tell you the meaning of the verb and then give you an example sentence so that you can see how it's used in context. The first verb that I have for you is arise. Arise, arose, arisen. That is the present, the past, and the past participle. It just means to become apparent or to notice something. So, to give you an example, I could use it in the past and say, new problems arose last week, which delayed the project. If you were working on something and problems arose, then that may delay the work that you're doing. Problems arose. Then we have the verb bear, bore, born. Notice that with the past participle, you may find it with the E or without the E. This verb has a few different meanings. It can mean to turn slightly in one direction. It can also mean to accept something that is unpleasant or to give birth or produce. So, let me give you a few example sentences. I could say, if I'm giving directions, you need to bear to the left, or you need to bear to the right. This is a common way in which this verb is used in the present tense. Or perhaps I could say, he was the leader and bore the responsibility of his team. It was his team, so he bore the responsibility and had to accept maybe something unpleasant. Finally, I could use it in the present perfect and say, the apple trees have borne plenty of fruit this season. They have produced plenty of fruit, have borne. The next verb I have for you is behold, beheld, beheld. So, the past and the past participle are the same, and this verb just means to see or observe something. Often, I think you may hear it being used in the context of showing somebody something that you want them to see. And you'd say, behold, behold my water bottle. Now you'd want to show somebody something a little more exciting than a water bottle, but you get the idea as to how somebody might use this verb, behold, and then they would show somebody something that is important, or maybe even a little surprising. The next verb is creep, crept, crept. Now, this verb means to move slowly and carefully in order to avoid being heard. You don't want anybody to notice you. You don't want anybody to hear you. So you might creep through a room. That's kind of how I was going to use it in my example, and I was going to say, last night I crept into the kitchen and took a cookie. And that's actually a true story. Yes, last night I did. I crept into the kitchen, and the reason that I crept into the kitchen is that, well, I felt a little guilty. So I just didn't want anybody to hear me, and I crept into the kitchen. Notice how many times I say these verbs. I do that for a reason. So, you will hear it again and again and again, because this works. This will help you remember. Then we have deal, dealt, dealt. This verb has a couple of different meanings. It can mean to distribute cards, or that you have some kind of business in commercial trading and you are buying and selling things. I think most often you would use it in the context of a card game and playing cards, and somebody would deal the cards. So, I can give you an example sentence in which you could actually use all three forms of this verb. I could say, she deals the cards in the present tense, or in the past, she dealt the cards. Or if I want to use the past participle, I could give you a sentence in the present perfect, she has dealt the cards. Then we have forsake, forsook, forsaken. This verb means to abandon or to give up. For example, I think of usually some kind of promise or commitment that was abandoned. People take vows, so somebody could say, he has forsaken his vows. He has abandoned his commitment, his promises. He has forsaken his vows. Now, the next two verbs cause a lot of confusion, and I hope to clear up some of that confusion right now. So let's just start with lie, lay, lain. This verb means to assume a resting position or to be kept in a specific state. That's where you are. So let me give you an example. I will use it in the past and say, well, I didn't feel well. I lay in bed all day. This happened in the past. I assumed that resting position in my bed, and I lay in bed. Don't confuse this with the other meaning of the verb, which is to say something that's not true. That is actually a regular verb and ends in ed. But still, this irregular verb, lie, lay, lain, is confused with another irregular verb, which is lay, laid, laid. This verb means to put something down or to prepare something. Lay, laid, laid. So let me give you an example. and we'll start with putting something down. Again, I can use one sentence and use all three forms. For example, I could say, we lay the baby on the bed in the present tense, or in the past we laid the baby on the bed, or using the past participle, we have laid the baby on the bed. We have put the baby down. Then to give you an example with its other meaning, to prepare something. I think you may hear somebody say, we've already laid the groundwork for this project. Laid the groundwork. They have prepared for the start of this project. So please don't confuse these verbs. Lie, which is to assume a resting position. Lie in bed, or lay, which is to put something down. I'm going to lay my head down on the pillow. Then we have mean, meant, meant. This, I think, is actually a very common verb, but the meaning can be a little challenging. What this verb means is to intend or to refer to something. Often, I think it's used when we're talking about questions. Well, what does this mean? I might ask students, well, what does this word mean? Or if I want to use it in the past and say, well, that is not what I was referring to, you may hear somebody say, well, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. I didn't want to refer to this thing. That's not what I meant. Then we have the verb overtake, overtook, overtaken. This verb means to come from behind and move in front of. Often, I think you would hear this verb used in the context of driving because cars pass each other all the time, and you might want to overtake a car that is in front of you. I can give you an example and say, well, we overtook the bus because it was driving so slow. So we came from behind and went in front of the bus. We overtook the bus. Then we have the verb rise, rose, risen. This verb has a couple of different meanings. The first one is to move from a lower position to a higher position. And the next meaning is just to get up. So let's start with the first meaning, and I'll give you an example. I could give you a simple sentence and use all three forms. I could say, well, the sun rises, or in the past, the sun rose, or using the past participle, the sun has risen. If I want to say get up, I often think of the expression rise and shine, and somebody would say this, just telling somebody else to get up. It's time to start your day. Rise and shine. Next is the verb swear, swore, sworn. And this verb means that you are making a promise to do something. Swear, swore, sworn. Let me give you another example in which you could use all three forms in this one sentence. I could say, he swears to tell the truth, or in the past, he swore to tell the truth, or he has sworn to tell the truth. Often, I think it's used in that context of you're making a promise in which you are going to tell the truth. I think it's also used as a question, and somebody would just ask, do you swear? Do you promise? Or they might say, do you swear on something? That is important, which in that case, it's kind of an expression, which means, well, you really have to be serious about this promise to swear on something. Then we have shake, shook, shaken. And this verb means to move something up and down, down, or from side to side, or even to tremble. I could use it and give you an example and just say, when we met, we shook hands. I often think of this verb being used talking about introductions and people shaking hands. To give you an example about trembling, I think, in that case, I think somebody's very cold. And not only that, but I think it would often be used in the continuous tense. So I could say, last night was very cold and I was shaking. I was shaking as I lay in bed. Next is weep, wept, wept. And this verb means just, to cry or to shed tears. Often, I think it would be used in a context that is a little more serious, a little more severe, in which you would say that you wept. You were crying a lot. For example, I could say that after the breakup, he wept for days. He was so sad. He wept for days. Then we have withdraw, withdrew, withdrawn. And this verb means to remove something or to take something back. When I think of this verb, I think it's often used in the context of money. And you could say, she has withdrawn all her money from the bank account. She has removed it from her account. Or maybe you want to apply for a job and then you decide that you don't want it. And I can give you an example and use all three forms. I withdraw my name from consideration, or I withdrew my name from consideration, or I have withdrawn my name from consideration. Wow, I'm impressed that you have made it all the way to the end. Congratulations. I'm sure that you have learned some new vocabulary, and I'm sure that a lot of that was also a review, and it's good to get that review. Try to listen for these words, or if you're reading, try to identify them and also practice them if you're having a conversation. So if you enjoyed the lesson, please hit that like button. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. So long.